In this video, I'm going to teach you the exact step-by-step process to build massive self-confidence in all areas of your life. I'm someone who used to be extremely shy and self-conscious and totally lacking in any sort of confidence. And this process that we're going to go over is what I've personally gone through to completely transform myself and change all of this at a very deep level. And I'm going to take you through this entire process that I've gone through and explain all the steps involved and how you can take the same underlying process and apply it to your own life, whatever your circumstances might be. But before we get into this, first, it's important to understand what exactly confidence actually is and what exactly is happening when you build it. And when you really understand this, then the whole process will make a lot more sense. And it'll almost be like a natural way of applying this understanding in the real world. So that's what we're going to be talking about in the first part of this video. So first of all, I think it's important to really truly understand and almost feel the fact that we are animals, and the more primitive and animalistic parts of our mind that stretch back further in evolution have much more power and control over us and our feelings and behavior than the more modern cognitive reasoning parts of our mind that evolved later on. And the most primitive and fundamental aspect of the mind and psychology out of everything that basically trumps everything else is predator-prey psychology. And this is actually connected with everything to do with self-confidence. So for example, if you think about the feeling of being self-conscious, like if you are walking down the street or in a public place and you feel like there are people looking at you and judging you, what exactly is this feeling? Basically, it's you feeling that you are within the perspectives of the other people who are around. So you feel that you are within their frame. And the same is true for any kind of self-conscious feeling or insecurity or feeling inferior or anything like that. It's all a feeling that you are within the judgmental perspective of other people and feeling that you are being negatively judged by them. Now, if you think about what a prey feels when it's confronted with a predatory threat, it's basically the same thing, where it feels that it is within the world or the frame of the predator. So they feel self-conscious, like they are within the eyes and perspective of something that is more powerful than they are. But if you flip it around and look from the perspective of the predator, it is looking at the prey through its own eyes and from its own frame of reality, and it feels that the prey is within its world. And it's the same psychology with us. Like in situations where you feel confident, it's an evolved and adapted version of the same kind of predator psychology, where you feel that other people are in your world so that you're free to express yourself and not really concerned about what they think about you. But in situations where we feel self-conscious, all of our inhibitions and anxieties and feeling inferior or like avoiding certain situations or any other kind of self-conscious reaction, all of these are part of a self-protection mechanism to prevent us from exposing ourselves to the possibility of negative judgment of other people. In the same way that prey will instinctively avoid exposing themselves to the possibility of being spotted and attacked by a predator. Basically, what's happened is that the same underlying psychology that originated in predator-prey relationships in nature has evolved over hundreds of millions of years to take on different forms. First of all, with dominance hierarchies within the same species, where one animal will feel that they are within the frame of someone more dominant than they are and react submissively towards them in order to prevent like some sort of retaliation. And this has evolved even further within human society and human psychology, where the group is much more powerful than any one individual. And we have these kinds of submissive reactions towards the crowd or society as a whole, and people's individual dominance and confidence is tied together together with their relationship to the crowd or to society. So basically, on an unconscious level, we see the crowd as something a lot more powerful than we are. And if it's turned against us, then it has the ability to potentially destroy our existence, just like a predator. So on a deep unconscious level, we feel the judgments of other people or the judgment of the crowd in almost the same way as a predatory threat. And it's connected to all the same deep survival instincts and raw emotions. And it's why the fear of being judged or rejected or embarrassed or anything like that can cause such powerful emotional reactions and have such a powerful control and influence over our lives. And this affects everything from our behavior and our facial expressions and our vocal projection, our posture and body language, our ability to express ourselves or our opinions, and the list goes on and on. But if you want to feel more confident and you focus only on these outward things, it actually changes nothing. It only creates like an obviously fake kind of confidence. What is necessary is a deep level change in psychology, so that instead of feeling that you are within the world of the crowd and suppressed by this potential predatory threat, instead of that, you feel that the crowd is within your world. Then you feel comfortable to just be yourself and express yourself freely without being suppressed or shut down. And this is also related to sexual attraction, where a girl needs to feel that she is within your frame as a man in order to be attracted to you. But when you interact with her, you are simultaneously facing what you unconsciously perceive to be her entire social world and her place within society as a whole. And it's only when you feel inside that you have the strength and the confidence and the dominance relative to these external social forces that these things don't suppress you or cause you to hesitate and flinch and react and be like super nervous or submissive. And when you have that kind of confidence, then you are able to like hold strong eye contact and freely express yourself and communicate directly to deeper layers of her mind and her animal and sexual instincts and desires, where she feels that she is within your frame as a man and gravitates towards you. And we'll talk more about sexual attraction a bit later in this video, but for now, the point is that on a deep unconscious level, there is this sort of like predator-prey dynamic and the same kind of underlying psychology that we've been talking about at the root of raw sexual attraction. And it's deeply connected to confidence in all other areas of life. So what it all comes down to is, do you feel that you are within the world of other people and being judged and suppressed, or do you feel that they are within your world where you are free to express yourself and just be yourself? If you've ever heard, for example, of the advice to overcome stage fright, where you imagine that everyone in the audience is naked, that's exactly the same idea. Like to imagine that the crowd is in an embarrassing state to try to trick your mind into feeling that you are elevated in status in relation to them. So that instead of being afraid of what they think, you feel like they are the ones who should be embarrassed and within your judgmental eyes, so that you feel less nervous and more confident and more free to express yourself. But these kinds of like mental tricks don't actually work, and they especially don't bring about any sort of real, lasting, deep level psychological change that makes you naturally feel more confident in these situations or in life in general. And the same goes for most watered down advice that you might find on like YouTube videos, or if you search on Google or something like that. These will mostly just give you similar kinds of tricks or changes in mindset that have no real effect on strengthening the core of who you are and giving you real confidence that comes from within. The real way to bring about this kind of change is more like working out. It's something that you build up over time through actual training. Basically, what you're doing is building up the inner emotional strength to be able to naturally hold your frame under pressure and be able to handle stress and the opposing judgments and opinions of other people without being affected or shut down. And as for how to actually do this in practice in the real modern human world, that's what we're going to be talking about in the next part of this video. I spent 2 entire years of my life backwards engineering the entire process that I've gone through to build confidence and to transform myself on a deep level. And I made it into a form of step-by-step training that anyone can do. The result of this is a 16-hour comprehensive course called Self-Mastery. We're obviously not going to have enough time to cover everything in this video right now, but what I want to do is give you a sort of condensed version where I'll take you inside the actual course and explain each of the stages involved in this process. So basically, how this process of self-mastery works is that we start out by building a solid foundation and then building on top of that foundation layer by layer until it encompasses pretty much everything in life. So each module builds off of the foundation set in the previous modules, and altogether it is a complete and comprehensive system. And this all starts in the first module with self-discipline training, or as I like to call it, developing a force of will to be able to push through internal weakness and resistance. Basically, the reason why self-discipline is so vital for developing confidence goes back to what we talked about earlier, about how any kind of self-conscious feeling or nervous reaction is a self-protection mechanism to prevent you from exposing yourself to the possible negative judgments and opinions of other people. So for example, if you feel nervous to do something, the natural instinct is to avoid that situation or get away from whatever it is that is the cause of that feeling. But the only way to actually overcome this nervousness is to actually expose yourself and face the situation and then acclimatize to the pressure over time. But the only way to expose yourself to this kind of pressure in the first place and to go through this kind of process is by an act of will. Basically just forcing yourself to do it. Otherwise, your unconscious reactions are going to have complete control over you and dictate your behavior and pretty much everything in your life. So that's where self-discipline training comes in. So to put it simply, if you develop the kind of discipline and will to be able to push through and overpower things like laziness and physical weakness and feeling like you want to give up and quit, you can apply this same kind of will on a more social level to overcome your social inhibitions and weaknesses. In each case, it's a matter of you and your will pushing through the resistance that your physical organism and your unconscious mind imposes on you. So in a way, this step of developing self-discipline is kind of like separate from the rest of the overall process of building confidence. It's more like a prerequisite or like a kind of supplementary training, kind of like how building stamina is like a supplementary training for martial arts or pretty much any other sport. Even though doing things like running or riding a bike to develop stamina might not have anything to do with the skills involved in those sports. So developing self-discipline in this process of self-mastery is very similar. The second stage in this process and the second module is about developing strong eye contact. And this is not just about eye contact in and of itself. It actually goes a lot deeper, and it's directly connected to all the deeper animal emotions and instincts that we were talking about earlier. And it's a way to tap into this deeper part of yourself and begin to strengthen yourself on this level. Just to give an example, like maybe you felt it before where you make eye contact with an attractive girl, and maybe you feel like a twinge of fear and then instinctively look away without even thinking about it. But if you hold that eye contact and maintain that sort of tension inside of yourself it can rile up these deep instinctive emotions, and you can tap into this deeper animal nature inside of you. And I'm sure everyone has felt the power of eye contact on some level in their own life. But the question is, why does it trigger this kind of raw emotional response? Basically, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. The eyes are directly connected to predator-prey psychology, going back hundreds of millions of years in evolution. Basically, from the feeling of being in the eyes of a predator, which triggers a fear response and fight or flight instincts to immediately kick in. So for example, a lot of animals actually have fake eye markings to scare off predatory threats, because seeing eyes triggers like a universal instinctive response that goes to the very deepest layers of the animal mind and psychology. So it's not just humans, but every animal has this kind of instinct. And just like we talked about in the last part of this video, this kind of predator-prey psychology is at the core of self-confidence and our relationship with the crowd and other people. So eye contact is a way to tap into this in the most raw and direct way possible, where it's either you looking at other people or looking out at the world through your own eyes and from your own perspective, or you feel that you are within the eyes and the judgments of other people. This is at the core of what self-confidence is all about, which extends into all other areas of life. So basically, eye contact and the deeper emotions that it's connected to is kind of like the source of everything, or like the seed from which everything else grows out of. And no matter how much progress you make, and no matter how advanced you get on this path of self-mastery and building confidence, eye contact is always going to be at the core of it. And your eye contact is going to get stronger and have a greater depth as you continue to make progress and build deeper and deeper layers of confidence. The third stage is all about tapping into internal energy and the emotional system. So just to give an example, like if you think about the feeling of being rejected or hurt by someone, or if you're under a lot of pressure and stress, and how that can sort of drain you and shut down your energy and shut down your emotional state. Or on the contrary, when you feel full of energy and you have a sort of natural charisma and the ability to influence other people's emotions, and everything just feels amazing. And even if there are people who might be looking at you or judging you, all of that just sort of bounces off of you and has no effect on you at all. This kind of energy and emotional state is at the root of what self-confidence is all about. But it's not just as simple as snapping your fingers and then you have this kind of energy. There's a process to develop it. Just like we mentioned before, building confidence is similar to working out. And what it really is a workout of your emotional system, which is directly connected to this feeling of energy and vitality. So there's a process of adaptation that you go through. And when you put yourself through this kind of process, there are actual physiological changes and stress adaptations that take place on a cellular level, similar to the process of breakdown and rebuilding of your muscles that happens as a result of working out. And the result of this process is a greater emotional strength and energetic resilience to handle social pressure without being affected by it, so that you can continue to have this kind of feeling of energy and vitality without being shut down, even in situations that used to cause you a lot of stress or that you couldn't handle before. And this can be applied to absolutely anything, whether it's talking in front of people or meeting girls or adapting to any kind of social environment or any kind of pressure or stress or anything like that. And in the full course, we go over this in a lot more detail, as well as exercises to consciously tap into all of this and the process to overcome things like social anxiety and feelings of self-consciousness and discomfort, as well as how to navigate through the more long-term breakdown and rebuilding of the emotional system in order to make massive progress over time. So all of that being said, this module is not really a step in this process, like something that you go through and then move on to the next step. This is more like the core of the entire process, and it's something that will permeate throughout the entire thing. And the same can be said for the previous 2 modules as well. So in other words, these first 3 modules are the foundational layers of training, and they're at the core of what self-mastery and building confidence is all about. And then the rest of the course is about how to bring this into different areas of life and use the social world as a kind of training ground. So this starts with a module on the laws of sexual attraction. Everything to do with sexual attraction is completely connected to self-confidence and mastery over yourself. To put it simply, for example, like if I go and approach a girl, if I don't draw her attention to me in a way that she feels that she is in my world and in my frame, then she's not going to be attracted and she's not going to want to stop and talk to me. And this is not just with approaching, but at any stage in the interaction and even deep into an established relationship. She needs to feel that she is in your frame. But in order to be able to do this, first of all, you have to actually feel that she is in your world. Like you can't feel that you are in her world, if that makes sense. So for example, like if you are talking to a girl and you're nervous and afraid of what she's going to think about you, what that actually is you reacting to her frame. And if you behave in this kind of way, it communicates to her that you have low status in relation to her, because unconsciously, you're not just reacting to her, but you're also afraid of the kind of backlash that could happen afterwards, like what she might tell other people and how that might affect your overall reputation and stuff like that. So you're not just facing her, but her entire social world. So if you feel that you are in her frame, then the way that you come across is going to communicate to her unconscious mind that you can't protect her and that you can't pass on good genes to her children that are going to help them survive. So she's not going to have any emotional or sexual interest, and she's not going to be attracted to you. Basically, if she feels that you are in her frame, then it's impossible for her to be attracted to you. But on the other hand, if it's the other way around and you feel that she is in your world, then you will naturally be confident and you'll have penetrating eye contact and you'll be able to freely express yourself and all of these kinds of things. But then as you continue to interact with her, she's going to push back on this and she's going to test your frame and she's going to give you shit tests and challenge your opinions and withdraw her attention from you. And if you start reacting to these tests, then you will lose the frame and she will likewise lose attraction to you. But if you can hold your ground and pass these tests, then that reaffirms your frame and reaffirms the fact that she is within your frame. And the more that you do this, the deeper the connection and the deeper that she falls into your frame until ultimately you have sex, which is like the ultimate surrender of her frame to yours. So in other words, attraction and success with women in general is entirely dependent on your ability to hold your frame. And this is the linking ground between confidence and sexual attraction. Because as we've talked about already, confidence is your ability to maintain your frame. So in order to have success and get better with girls, you basically have to develop a stronger frame. But the only way to do this is through actual experience. Like it's one thing to understand all of these things intellectually, but it's another to build yourself up to the point where you can actually do it. And that's what the next stage and the next module is all about. How to meet girls and date and lead things towards a sexual relationship and do it in a way that is like a form of training. And the way to do this is kind of like rock climbing. I've only ever tried rock climbing once before. I was with my friend who is a professional rock climber in China. So I tried on a pretty advanced cliff that was like way beyond what I was capable of. But I remember I would try it once and make it up to a certain point, and then I couldn't get past it and I would fall. But then my mind would immediately start thinking about how I could make it past that last obstacle that made me fall. And then I would try again and make it a little bit further and then fall again. And it's very similar with dating, where maybe at some point you'll screw things up and get rejected, but you'll learn from that and you'll start thinking about, like, maybe if you did things a little bit differently at that point, then you could progress a little bit further. Right? So basically you learn from your own experience and get better and better over time. But also, just like with rock climbing, it's not just about the technical skills, but you also need the strength and the stamina to be able to actually do it, which you only get through repeated training over a period of time. So in the same way, with meeting girls, you'll build up the emotional strength and the confidence and the strength of frame over time to be able to actually do things successfully. And we're not going to have time right now to go into detail about exactly how to do all of this, but that's what this module in the full course is all about, like the practical side of how to actually get good with girls and how to systematically build up the skills and the confidence inside of yourself over time. This includes step-by-step instructions of how to do everything, like how to meet girls, how to start a conversation, how to build a connection, and how to move things towards sex, and also the more internal aspects, like how to build momentum and energy, and how to deal with the deeper layers of fear and the kind of like struggle and the process of leveling up that takes place over time. And part of this process involves going to deeper and deeper layers of emotion and building strength at these deeper layers as you make progress. And this reaches the deepest layers when it comes to actual relationships. And that's what the next stage and the next module inside the course is all about. Building inner strength at these deepest layers of emotion, basically by using the drama and the frame battles and everything else that happens in relationships to weed out deep-seated emotional weaknesses and develop a real depth of internal emotional strength over time. And this can take on many different forms, but basically what it comes down to is validation. So the point is that each person is sort of like feeding off of the validation from the other person to a greater or lesser degree. This is just the way that we are wired as humans. And it's like the glue that actually holds relationships together in the first place. And when that validation is not received, then there will be some sort of like drama that flares up. And when this happens, in one way or another, the validation will be sort of ripped away from you, which can sometimes really affect you. You know, basically, it's a lot like getting rejected, but in a relationship, this can go right to your deepest insecurities and weaknesses that can even stem from early childhood. And in some cases, this can even be the source of the greatest pain in your entire life, for example, with heartbreak. And this kind of drama can also lead to a tendency for you to slowly capitulate and give in to this kind of thing and become more and more complacent and emotionally dependent on her, sometimes without you even realizing it. But if instead of that, you weather the storm of all the drama and digest the effects that this has on your system and resist the pull towards emotional dependency, then it will make you stronger over time at these deeper levels so that you are more able to handle the drama without being affected by it. And by doing this, you are strengthening your frame and building confidence at these deeper layers of emotion. And the more strength that you build at these deeper levels, the less that this kind of drama will affect you, which will also naturally result in better and more harmonious relationships where you can maintain your frame and the polarity in the relationship no matter what kind of drama comes up. And we go into a lot more detail about how to actually do this inside the course. And really, these last 3 modules as a whole cover pretty much everything that you'll ever need to know about dating and relationships and how to get good with women and how to use this to develop inner strength and confidence. But it's not only girls and relationships that affect us like this, and it's not the only factor when it comes to building confidence. Just like we talked about earlier, really at the core of our entire psychology is our relationship with what I call the crowd, or in other words, it's your relationship with the overall social world that you are a part of, or in whatever situation that you are currently facing. And this is what the next module in the course is all about. And I want to start this off with a specific example to illustrate the kind of psychological relationship that we have with the crowd and how it actually plays out in the real world. So think about the difference between a comedian who's having a bad night, like getting heckled and booed with no one laughing at his jokes, versus when he's having an amazing night with total influence over the crowd's emotions and making everyone laugh on command. It's the same person in two different psychological states. So on the bad night, he is self-conscious and viewing himself through what he imagines to be the judgmental eyes of other people. Basically worried about what they think and feeling that they are looking down on him and feeling inadequate and inferior and behaving in reaction to what he thinks they are thinking. And on the good night, he is looking through his own eyes and influencing the crowd, unconcerned about any negative opinions and assuming that he is liked and freely expressing himself. So on the bad night, he feels that he is within the world of the crowd to which he is inferior and doesn't belong. And on the good night, he feels that the crowd is within his world. So in other words, it's the feeling of being looked at and being judged versus looking out at the world through your own eyes. This is exactly the same predator-prey psychology that we were talking about earlier. And it's a part of our consciousness in every conceivable situation. So it's not just when we are directly facing a crowd of people. Even when there's no visible crowd in front of us, it still exists unconsciously in our minds as like a general image or feeling of society or some group of people. So in other words, we are always a part of some crowd, and we always have a relationship with this crowd. Just to give a few examples, this could be like your social circle or your work environment or the immediate environment that you're in, like in a mall or in a restaurant or something like that, or the city or the country that you live in, or any kind of online environment, or any kind of social or political movement, or even the entire society as a whole. Basically, every conceivable environment or situation that you can think of involves its own crowd with its own set of judgments. So building confidence in any situation involves changing your unconscious relationship with the crowd in that situation, where you go from feeling that you are within the judgmental perspectives of the people in that crowd and feeling self-conscious and inferior to feeling that the crowd is within your world. This is the key to building confidence in all areas of life. And I go over all of this in a lot more detail inside the actual course and like how to do all of this. But the point for now is that in order to build confidence in anything and in life in general, you have to face and digest the pressure of the crowd in order to bring about this kind of psychological transformation. This is basically the key to everything. And as long as you keep on doing this, you'll continue to make progress over time, and you can keep expanding it into different areas of your life. But as you continue to do this, in conjunction with everything else that we've already gone over in the previous stages, along the way, you are inevitably going going to face different kinds of difficulties and hardships and reach plateaus and periods of time where it seems like you're not really making much progress, and like times where you have to face deeper layers of emotional pain and struggle. So things are not always going to go completely smoothly. So it's really important to be able to understand the overall process as a whole and the kind of progression that you can expect to make over time, so that you don't get discouraged when the times get tough, and you can have like a more long-term vision and know how to execute your training both in the short term and the long term in order to get the kind of results that you are really capable of. And that's what the final stage and the final module in the course is all about. Like the overall process of mastery itself. Basically, there's a universal process involved when it comes to developing any kind of skill. And it's no different for this process of building confidence and mastery over yourself. So for example, if you learn a language, there are incremental steps that you need to take in order to be able to do it. So you can't just like pick up a book and start reading and expect to slowly start understanding it and make linear progression if you just keep on trying. The way to actually do it is that you first need to learn the foundations, like the basic grammar and the vocabulary. And then once you build that up to a sufficient level, then you can start putting it into practice and having basic communication. But then when you try to talk to people, there are going to be like so many things that you don't understand and so many things that you can't express and so many gaps in your abilities that you have to focus time to study and fill in these shortcomings. But then at a certain point, you'll start getting a little bit better. And for a period of time, it might feel like you're making rapid progress where things start making sense and your brain can process and make sense out of what you're hearing. But then as you continue to practice, you'll again start to feel the limits of your abilities. So you'll reach another plateau and like a period of struggle where you just have to grind away and keep on studying and practicing until you reach the next period of rapid progress. So there's never a straight linear progression where you just keep on doing the same thing and slowly get better. And it's the same with this process that we're talking about here, where sometimes you can make like really rapid progress, but you'll also have to face difficulties and struggle and hit plateaus or down periods, where maybe you're more negative or like you don't have much energy. But in the grand scheme of things, all of this is necessary to make progress. And in truth, you're actually making just as much progress during the plateaus and the periods of struggle as you are during the periods of seemingly rapid progress. So basically, you can take the same kind of process of mastering a language or an instrument or any other skill and apply it to everything that we've been talking about in this video. And if you stick with it, then you can make absolutely massive progress over time. And now that we've gone through this whole process, in the final part of this video, I want to address one key thing that if you keep this in mind and always apply it to whatever it is that you're doing and whatever part of this process that you're working on, it can help you to, first of all, get started and then to keep building momentum and keep expanding on that momentum, and also to keep getting back on your feet when you face hardships and keep restarting and regaining momentum so that you never get stuck and basically nothing will be able to stop you. This is really the key to be able to make progress on this path, both in the short term and the long term. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the final part of this video. One of the biggest problems when it comes to building confidence and everything that we've talked about so far in this video is that even if you understand the process and you understand that it's possible for you to do, there can still be like something inside of you preventing you from going out and actually taking the necessary steps to do it. Like if I told you that if you go through this process, you can become confident in pretty much any environment that you want. and you can date beautiful girls who you're really attracted to. You can have like whatever kind of social life that you want, and you can pretty much work your way up to doing whatever it is that you want to do. Or even if you don't have an ambition for like any sort of crazy results, but you just want to like feel better and be more confident in general and have a better life, hopefully at this point now you understand that this is in fact possible for you to do. But that still doesn't change the fact that it might feel impossible for you to do right now. And in practice, it might even seem like sort of overwhelming. This is basically a success barrier where, like, if you imagine the kind of success that is possible for you, or the kind of things that you would want to do, then you also have to face the kind of pressure that comes along with it. And this is true both on a large scale and a small scale. So for example, if you're just nervous to do something, there's a gap between the way that you feel in the moment and actually doing the thing that makes you nervous and being comfortable doing it. But the way to overcome this gap is not to try to get rid of this feeling, but rather to know how to actually bridge the gap between where you are right now and where you potentially can be in the future, so that you can take steps towards that goal despite any sort of resistance that you might have to actually doing it, and in a way that's not so difficult or overwhelming. The way that I like to think about it is like building a fire. So for example, if you hold up a lighter to a big log, then the log is just going to smother out the flame. Like, you're never going to start a fire in that way. But if you just start out small by first just lighting paper and then adding kindling and then small twigs and slowly work your way up, then eventually you'll have a fire big enough to burn through the same log that the lighter had no effect on in the beginning. And it works exactly the same way with building confidence and with everything that we've talked about in this video. Like, if you try to do everything all at once or put yourself under too much pressure, like if you were to just throw yourself on stage in front of thousands of people without working your way up to that, it's just going to smother out your inner fire. And if you're confronted with that kind of pressure, then you're probably not even going to do it. And it's going to be like a roadblock that prevents you from making any progress at all. But if you start out small and work your way up over time, then you'll be able to do all of these things that were too much for you to handle in the beginning. And this is very important to understand. Like, even things that seem impossible in the beginning, if you just start out from the foundations and work your way up over time, then you'll be able to reach levels that you probably wouldn't even be able to imagine right now. There's one lesson in the self-mastery course called the 5-step process to transform and harness nervous energy. This is basically a way to deal with and overcome social anxiety, where you start out by simply exposing yourself to the situation for a very short period of time, kind of like dipping your toes in the cold water, and then slowly building it up from there over the course of like a couple of weeks. And what happens is that as you do this, the same nervous energy that might overwhelm your system in the beginning and make you feel anxious and unable to think clearly, over time, you start to harness this energy so that you basically have control over it, and you can start to channel it into the situation. And actually, the entire process that we went over in the last part of this video and the self-mastery course as a whole is also structured around this same principle. So you start out by building the foundations and then building on top of that layer by layer until it extends into all areas of your life. So basically, the entire course as a whole, both on a micro and macro level, is structured around this principle of starting out small and working your way up over time. And if you just keep applying this principle, then again, it's just like building a fire, where as long as you keep stoking the fire, it's going to keep on expanding and growing, and you can keep building and building on it to make a bigger and more stable and more blazing fire. And when you apply this principle, no matter what it is that you're doing, the most important thing is just to start with the first step. Like only focus on the first step or whatever step it is that you're currently working on. Everything else will follow after that. But if you don't take the first step, then nothing else will follow at all, and you won't make any progress whatsoever. So it's extremely important. And it's also something that's always relatively easy to do. You know, it's much easier to dip your feet in the cold water for like 15 seconds than it is to take like a 20-minute ice bath, for example. But you can work your way up to the 20-minute ice bath if you just take that relatively easy first step and then continue to expand on it from there. And the same is true for this entire process of building confidence as a whole, or starting out on your own journey. You have to take the first step, and then everything else will follow after that. So basically, the journey always has to start with the first step. And I actually just want to end this video off by speaking to you as though you were my past self, like when I was in my early 20s, before I ever learned any of this. And one of my biggest problems in the very beginning, when I actually started on this path, was that I didn't have the full picture or the understanding of things like I do now. It was only something that I became more and more aware of through just trial and error and like random things happening in my life that slowly led me on this path. So if I had access to all of this information at the very beginning of my journey, or even better, if I had it years earlier, then I could have saved myself a lot of fruitless years of my life and a lot of time and sometimes pain and feelings of dissatisfaction and lacking direction and dullness in my life. Because this kind of process is not just something that happens naturally over the course of time as you get older, because the natural tendency is to avoid things that you feel uncomfortable doing and to avoid pushing your boundaries and avoid putting yourself out there and just continue living in more or less the same kind of way that you do now, year after year. So basically, it takes an active effort to actually make progress. Like you actually have to do something and go against this natural tendency. And if you don't start right now and just put it off until tomorrow or next week or at some unknown point in the future, then that mentality will just carry over. And then once tomorrow comes, then it's still going to be tomorrow, and it's never going to actually come. And then let's say like 1 year or 2 years go by and you haven't really made any progress. If you just start right now, then in a month from now or in a year from now, like if you persist with this, you can make absolutely massive progress. So just think about what you could accomplish in the next year if you just get started right now, compared to where you'll be if you just wait and do nothing for the next year, right? Even if it's difficult in the beginning, and even if you don't feel like you're quite ready yet or whatever, it'll be 1,000% worth it in the end. I remember one time I met a wise old man during my travels in China, and there was one piece of advice that he gave me that really stuck. He said, in life, when you arrive at a cliff, jump off the cliff. So that's what I want to encourage you to do right now by taking this first step and starting on this journey. So what I want to do is give you the opportunity to sign up to the full self-mastery course. All you have to do is just click on the button below and sign up. And I want to thank you for joining me in this crash course video. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I hope to see you inside the course.